please. All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for turning out for this public hearing on Middleton's comprehensive plan. This is the September 26th meeting of the Plan Commission. I'm Lisa Hanairo. I'm the alder from District 6, and I'm the vice chair of the Plan Commission. And since our mayor, Emily Kuhn, is in Washington, D.C., speaking at a conference and receiving Middleton's certification as a lead city, she has turned it over to me tonight. I would ask everybody to please silence your phones if you've got them on. And if you're here in council chambers and you'd like to make a comment, please fill out one of these forms and hand it to staff. I already have a stack with me, and I'll read out the names in the order that they were received. If you're online on Zoom, please raise your hand to speak, and one of the staff will let me know that you are ready to speak. And whether you're in the room or online, please do, when you get to the microphone or unmute your line, please state your name and your address for the record. You'll each have up to 3 minutes, and Rashika will be timing your remarks. In fairness to everyone, because we do have a large crowd tonight, please do end your remarks when the time is called. So today's hearing is specifically about the draft of Amendment 2 of Middleton's comprehensive plan. And this is the first full revision of the comp plan, as we call it, since it was published 2.5 years ago in March of 2021. When that 2021 version came out, it was the first time in 15 years that the plan had been updated. 15 years is a long time. I'm very pleased that the city is following through on its commitment to, and I'm quoting the plan here, review and as necessary, update this plan annually in order to maintain it as a living document, one that remains relevant and is consulted frequently by officials as they make decisions about how our community grows and changes. As a member of council who serves on several committees in addition to Plan Commission, I can tell you that I, for one, frequently consult the comp plan to guide the decisions that come before me. I'm not alone in that. All of us on council, the mayor, the city administrator and staff, and all our committees, commissions, and boards really are bound to know what's in the plan and to understand the actions and how they relate to their committee responsibilities, and then to follow through on the over 225 actions that are in the plan. We also let the vision and the values in the plan guide us as we think about Middleton's growth as a city. Council first learned last December that the comp plan would be revised this year. This major project for staff, I acknowledge all the work you all have done. This major project runs parallel to the rewriting of our zoning code, which began over 2 years ago in June of 2021. These are two related but distinct projects, and they're both wrapping up around the same time. And they need to be in sync with one another, so it isn't surprising that these two very large projects have wound up being on a similar timeline. I know from firsthand experience that it's easy to confuse these two projects, but they are distinct. So tonight's hearing, again, is about the comp plan. So please focus your comments on that. There will be 5 open houses for the zoning code rewrite for those who are interested, starting this Thursday night at Cromrie Middle School at 5:30. And I encourage anyone who is interested in the topic to attend one of those sessions. And you'll find the schedule for all 5 on the city's website. With that, let's begin the hearing. We're going to start with staff acknowledging comments already received.
Thank you. We received the following comments prior to the meeting. The comments opposed to the future land use map or FLU map changes as proposed for 2159 Allen Boulevard, Tony Browse, 2307 Middleton Beach Road, the Middleton Beach Road Neighborhood Association, Inga and Woody Haggy at 2607 Middleton Beach Road, Patrick and Melissa Klipstein at 2305 Middleton Beach Road, Sherry Caves, 2317 Middleton Beach Road, Steve and Ann Van Ness at 2311 Middleton Beach Road, Rob Bergenthal at 2309 Middleton Beach Road, and Dan Borud at 6203 Lakeview Boulevard. We received comments in support of the flu map change as proposed for 2159 Allen Boulevard from the property owners, which is Calcio LLC. We received comments supporting the flu map designation as proposed for 2021 Lakeview Avenue, 2136 Gateway Street, 6311 Lakeview Boulevard, 6313 Lakeview Boulevard, 6405 Lakeview Boulevard, 6411 Lakeview Boulevard, 6415 Lakeview Boulevard from Middleton Lakeview Apartments LLC, which is the owner. We received comments supporting the flu map designation as proposed for 2153 Middleton Beach Road from Middleton Beach Road LLC, which is the owner. We received comments supporting changing the 20-year fleet plan to a 5-year electric vehicle replacement fleet plan from Tony Browse at 2307 Middleton Beach Road. We heard concerns about language on page 19 of the document related to updating plans from Dan Borud at 6203 Lakeview Boulevard. Dan also noted a typo and a map that needs to be updated reflecting current Madison Metro routes. That is all of the comments that we received in advance.
Thank you. So we're going to start with Ginny Corwin, and then Tom Keepers will be next. And as Ginny is taking the podium and turning on the microphone, I will go back to staff to do the roll call. I called the meeting to order, but I did not do the roll.
I got it.
Adams,
Here.
Bruce,
Here.
Erdman Hermans,
Here.
Harp,
Here.
Paniro,
Here.
Summers,
Here.
and Mayor Kuhn is absent and excused.
Thank you, Abby. All right, Ginny, if the microphone is on, please again state your name and address for the record, and Rashika will time you.
Okay. I'm Ginny Corwin from 2319 Middleton Beach Road, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Middleton Beach Road residents. We're happy that the future land use map is being changed for the Mary Jacobson property from Avenue mixed use to conservancy. However, it begs the question why the same isn't true for 2159 Allen Boulevard. Both are within 1,000 feet of the shoreline, meaning they both are shoreline properties, and both function as water retention ponds after high rain events. We know that the need for stormwater management is the same all along the lake shore to Marshall Park. It does not stop at Mendota Avenue. Water flows from west to east and south to north, and the differences in these grades are actually greater on the Allen site than they are on the Jacobson site, and they both serve the same function. At the May 9th Plan Commission meeting, there was no discussion on how to split the Allen site between Avenue mixed use and established neighborhood. We know there are competing interests among the stakeholders, and what we're asking for is a solution that supports complementary interests. We asked the Plan Commission to revisit their decision, both on the zoning categories as well as any split between more than one. We recommend 3 possible choices for your consideration. The first is zone the entire site conservancy, like the Jacobson property, so it continues to serve stormwater management needs, and it could also continue to serve private soccer field needs. Second, zone the entire site single-family low density like it is now, with requirements for including best practices for managing stormwater on site, such as limited impervious surfaces, use of rain gardens, etc. Third, split the site between 75% conservancy on the Middleton Beach Road side, 25% planned neighborhood on the Allen Boulevard to reflect the scale, character, and urban design of the existing neighborhoods as stated in the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. And that would be multifamily residential low density. To be clear, we are not fighting against adding housing. We are fighting for the health of the lake. Engineers say they can improve the stormwater management of this site, but at what expense? It's at the expense of running more stormwater through the catch basins into the lake. That is completely counter to what Dane County and Clean Lakes Alliance has been working on for years, namely to reduce runoff into the lake. We ask the city to support Dane County's efforts and the lake. Given global climate change, we all need to support the lake. Middleton should show by its actions that it follows what's in the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Ginny. Next up is Tom Keepers, and after that, we'll have Douglas, looks like Caves.
Thank you. Hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Tom Keepers, one of your constituents that lives across the street from the green space at 2159. I'm at, my wife Bridget and I live at 2165 Middleton Beach Road. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the amendment number 2 proposal to change the zoning for this plot. The city's 20-year comprehensive master plan was approved by the Common Council just 2 years ago, 2021. It was a result of extensive, thoughtful deliberation, collaboration, and discussion among many parties to come to an agreement for 20-year planning that balances the needs of all stakeholders. Areas were identified, agreed upon for future housing needs, and locations for that housing were identified in the housing and population yield analysis on page 25 of the plan. Now we're facing a proposed zoning amendment for 2159 Allen Boulevard that runs counter to this well thought out strategic plan for properly developing a community. If you drive around Middleton, you'll notice that many developers have and are currently constructing new apartment complexes. We know from the concept meeting that we were at for this, there were 2 more properties being proposed out at Greenway. As of Friday, September 22nd, there were 722 vacant apartments in and around Middleton, according to the online rental site apartments.com. This has been a fairly consistent number, been monitoring over the past few months. Also, a number of small retail commercial storefronts are now sitting vacant. To suggest a zoning change that allows high-density housing units and commercial use on this site is not recognizing the business owners and residential property owners like us in the room who have already invested in the plan and are using it as a long-range planning guide it is supposed to embody. In the plan, 2159 Allen Boulevard is shown as single-family residential and also as a critical component of the urban greenway, which is a required part of the makeup of a successful and beautiful city. It is not listed as an infill site and is not an established commercial corridor. Rather, this green space is in the middle of an established single-family residential neighborhood, all of which is low density today. The new zoning ordinance states that development should, quote, reflect the scale, character, and urban density and intensity of the existing neighborhoods. Changing the zoning to mixed use does not comport with this guiding principle. We respectfully request that the commission consider the following options in rank order. Number 1, zone the entire site conservancy with enhanced stormwater capabilities. Number 2, zone the entire site single-family low density like it is now with requirements for including best practices for stormwater management. And last but not least, but not preferred, reverse the split. Make it 75% conservancy on the east side and 25% planned neighborhood on the west side. For your knowledge and for the record, at the recent meeting with the developers, one after another of your constituents, your neighbors stood up in opposition to the proposal, citing numerous issues. And you're hearing that again today. Your constituents on both sides of Allen Boulevard do not want the zoning change to enable building. This is a neighborhood. It's our neighborhood. It's not some faceless corridor to develop. Your vote should reflect the will of your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Douglas. And after Douglas, Tony Browse.
Douglas Caves, 2317 Middleton Beach Road. The ecological attributes of the soccer field site contribute significantly to the water quality of Lake Mendota, to the control of stormwater runoff, and to wildlife habitat. The east edge of this site is 200 feet from Lake Mendota, and the grade on the entire site runs from west to east toward the lake. Residential properties on the higher elevation on the west side of Allen Boulevard also contribute to surface runoff to the site. Existing stormwater outlets on the north and south sides of the property bring off-site drainage from approximately 146 acres of Middleton toward the site and directly to Lake Mendota via 2 major pipes, a 54-inch and a 42-inch pipe at the south and north ends of this site respectively. Low flows can be handled by these pipes. But typically anything over the 10-year storm runoff event will back up into the soccer fields. Unlike Madison and other cities, Middleton doesn't require accounting for this in their stormwater ordinance, but Dane County's stormwater management review of proposed development here will include these overflows. Development under Avenue mixed-use zoning would fill in this low-lying area, frustrating the flow reduction that now naturally occurs and which was a major mitigating factor in the 100-year storm events that occurred in 1993, 2000, and 2018. A high-density mixed-use apartment complex with large areas of impervious surface could leave future generations with a legacy of property costs from stormwater excess and reductions in water quality of Lake Mendota and the downstream Yahara Lakes. Since the devastating Dane County flood in 2018, estimated to cost over $154 million, cities are working to improve stormwater management. Madison is using flood modeling for citywide watershed study. They have now implemented some phases of the study and are using a $6 million FEMA grant to move forward on the proposed Pheasant Branch Tributary Greenway project. Similarly, Dane County recently announced its own plans to acquire 625 acres near Verona to improve wildlife habitat, conservation, and stormwater runoff in the Sugar River Wildlife Area. This site on Allen Boulevard provides an opportunity for the city of Madison to add to the efforts of Madison and Dane County to benefit all citizens by enhancing flood mitigation and improving the health of Lake Mendota and the area watersheds. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Rouse, you're next. And then after Tony is James Gurn.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tony Browse. I'm a resident of Middleton on Middleton Beach Road, 2307. I'm speaking as a vice president of the Neighborhood Association. You've heard everything practically that I have written out. So I'm going to just summarize it. By proposing avenue mixed use along Allen Boulevard and established neighborhood along Middleton Beach Road, the city ignores or minimizes the function and the character and the value of that 7-acre parcel that we call the soccer field. But there are, and you've heard compelling reasons to consider a much less intensive development option. In fact, there's been a few options proposed, but all of them point in the direction of health of the lake, improved stormwater management for very good reasons. We've all witnessed over the last roughly 30 years, 300-year storms that produced damage not only along the lake, but on our shoreline, but around the lake, wherever stormwater runoff and lake rise causes damage. And it caused millions, tens of millions of dollars in damage. And we know that more frequent and stronger storms are coming in this age of global climate change. So we need to aim for climate resilience, both locally and beyond our own immediate watershed. On the other hand, the parcel has the potential to do a lot of good. It has mainly hydric soils that can store a lot of water. It can sustain wetland vegetation, a pollinator garden or a community garden, and so on. Development is going to divert water from the watershed above it and water that falls on the parcel in a way that it will flow directly into the lake and the surrounding areas, possibly contaminating the conservancy that's there. You've heard much less intense options. One that I would reiterate is the 75-25 split, with 25 to 30% in a multifamily facility on the Allen Boulevard, and the rest of it conservancy with improved stormwater management. This will allow the developers and the owner to make a profit, and it really can provide for adequate protection to the lake and to the community. And I think Middleton has done a great job with climate resilience. It needs to do it again for this parcel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. James Gurn, you are next, and after James will be Dan Gibson.
Hi, my name is Jim Gurn, and I live at 2213 Middleton Beach Road. And I'd like to address some of the traffic issues associated with this development or this rezoning. So section 100103 states the purpose and intent of the proposed City of Madison zoning ordinance says this chapter is designed to control and lessen congestion in the streets, to provide for safe and efficient circulation of all modes of transportation, including transit, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic. So rezoning the 2159 Allen Boulevard lot to anything other than conservancy or maintaining the current zoning would run counter to the purpose and intent of Middleton's zoning code. The amendment number 2 proposed MUA and MRL zoning would add too many cars to the existing traffic at all hours, especially rush hours, which carries numerous commuters from areas on the north side of Lake Mendota. The road network plan on page 39 of the City of Middleton comprehensive plan identifies Allen Boulevard as a principal arterial with an average daily number of vehicles of approximately 19,000. So this count was taken in 2002 through 2014. So considering the considerable growth in communities north of us, today's counts and future counts are likely to be much higher. We all know the tremendous development going on around Bishop's Bay and so forth. The location of the lot, which for decades has been a soccer field, is at the bottom of a hill along a county road. The traffic moves fast along this Allen Boulevard corridor of County Q. Changing the zoning to permit an expected large-scale, high-density development requiring traffic slowing down to exit to a residence or the commercial space would create hazardous conditions for vehicles on Allen Boulevard or commuting bikers and pedestrians on the bike path. So Middleton Beach Road and Mendota Avenue were just reconstructed in 2022 and designed as 20-foot wide roads to carry R1 residential traffic. Lacking sidewalks, Middleton Beach Road was purposefully designed to promote walking and biking in a quiet neighborhood with slow traffic, where you see neighbors walking dogs, biking, and children on bikes and being pushed in strollers. Middleton Beach Road was not designed to accommodate traffic from a high-density mixed-use development, and such a development would increase the risk of accidents for bikers, pedestrians, and drivers alike. Again, Middleton's code is intended to provide for the safe and efficient use of all transportation modes, including transit, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic. Given this statement should govern all planning decisions, I strongly encourage you to resist the urge to change the zoning to a mixed use for 2159, and instead consider leaving it as is or changing it to support a conservancy with enhanced stormwater management capabilities. So thanks for considering these remarks.
Thank you. Right, Dan Gibson is next, and then Susan West.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Dan Gibson. I live at 2151 Middleton Beach Road and appreciate the chance to talk to you tonight. I've lived on Middleton Beach Road for many years, since 1972, and I'm very disappointed to see the city proposing the multifamily rezoning of the Allen Boulevard site. This is contrary to the recently developed 2021 Middleton Comprehensive Plan, and it is very much against the current harmony of our neighborhood and the surrounding area. At its roots, this land has been a wetland that was developed into soccer fields, which for many years served as a tremendous resource to the community and the development of youth soccer in Middleton and the surrounding area. I benefited from it myself. The owners of the property should be very proud of their past stewardship of the land, but sadly, the future does not look bright. Why are the owners and now the city itself proposing a rezoning that would allow for a massive high-density apartment development in an area that's surrounded by park, conservancy land, and Lake Mendota? It makes no sense, and it looks very profit motivated at the expense of our community and our natural resources. What's even more confounding is that after decades of waiting, literally decades, in 2022, a new road was finally installed on Middleton Beach Road, and it was built specifically to accommodate the soccer fields for how they're used today and the single-family homes surrounding it. There are additional options in addition to the solutions proposed by the Neighborhood Association. They've been talked about tonight. The city could consider purchasing this property or partnering with Dane County to make sure this land is maintained for recreation and conservancy purposes. This would protect our homes and, most importantly, our lakes during flooding events. This would absolutely support Middleton's Green City goals as outlined in the 21 comprehensive plan. I read it today. There's a whole section on the Green City goals that Middleton has outlined. So I fully support the recommendations that have been outlined by our neighborhood association, and I hope that you will carefully consider their proposal. It really is in the long-term best interests of our community. And before a decision is made, I'd encourage all of you to take a walk or a drive in our neighborhood in the coming weeks, because it's really an area that we're all proud of. And the development that is being proposed would make no sense. And I think you'll find that if you go walk this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan West and then Chris Fidania.
Full house.
I'm Susan West. I live at 3542 John Muir Drive. I'm a former council person. I've served on Conservancy Lands and on the Dane County Lands, Lakes and Watershed Commission. I am in complete agreement with all the statements that have previously been said. So I try not to dwell too much on them. But one of the big concerns I do have is on the environment, and I hope the Plan Commission will realize where the stormwater from the city that is south of University Avenue goes. It's into this area. That is a huge amount of water. We luckily, at least when we put in the new pump at Tiedemann Pond, it can be turned off in rain events, so it doesn't overwhelm the area. But this is a major stormwater route that needs to be considered. And I've got concerns that putting such a large building on top of it and making it all impervious surface will have a huge impact, not just on this neighborhood, the lakes, but also the rest of Middleton. Also to comment on traffic. Again, Allen Boulevard is a major road going from Middleton. All of us who worked in Madison would use it, or at least north of Pheasant Branch Creek again. And Wanakee, keep in mind, people going there to get into downtown Madison. That is growing tremendously. So traffic will be a huge issue. The next comment I have is one from our former police chief, Chuck Falk, when I was on council, kept telling us, do not approve any more apartment buildings. We do not have the police staff to take care of an increase in population. And it's not an implication that the people that will be moving in here are criminals or so on, but there are added traffic issues. They respond to all the EMS calls also to assist. They do many very good things for the city that aren't directly related to a crime. And we are already short-staffed. So that's something to be considered. And yes, I know we will get more tax money from this building being built, but it means, okay, we have to be able, the city has to be sure that they use that for supplying the necessary services that go specifically with this project. And lastly, I've got concerns because this is next to a TIF district. And I am concerned that the developer will be asking for TIF money to put in the pilings or whatever is needed to put a building of this size on such unstable land. And that will cost a significant amount. The TIF money should be used in the main university corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Chris F. Sorry if I butchered your last name. And then Angela Gibson, you're after Chris.
Chris Vidina at 2207 Middleton Beach Road. I've lived on the street since 1989. The lakeside of my property flooded in 1993, 2000, and 2018, but not my house or crawl space. If water is displaced from the construction of the proposed project to the east and north, as it has been previously presented, my house and crawl space on the street side would be affected, as well as every other house to the south of me. So my concern is, or one of my concerns, is will the city, the developer or owner of this project be liable, or all three, should our houses flood? And I know you can't answer that question right now, but it's something I think we should think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Angela Gibson, followed by Kent Carroll.
Hi, Angela Gibson, 2151 Middleton Beach Road. And I'll just point out that this morning, the soccer fields were soaked from the rains, the minimal rains that we've had. So it is definitely an issue. I have a couple of questions, which I know you can't answer here, but I want to just make them known as, because I think they are concerns we all have. The development north of the soccer fields at the old site of Captain Bill's had a petition against it with over 600 signatures. And from what I heard, the city did not even consider those signatures. So I really wonder, can you tell us why those wouldn't be considered for that, opposing that development? And really, what is the number of signatures that you need to reflect the constituents do not agree with this proposal? How can we be assured that you'll consider any petitions that we may circulate? Because really, we need transparency in this process so that we can know that our voices matter. Thank you.
Right, so Kent, it's either Carnell or Carroll. Carnell. All right, I guess Kent is not here. So Bill Connors. Oh, there he is. Okay. I can. And then Bill Connors will be next. And that's the list I have in the room. We'll go to Zoom next. And then I'll see if anybody else in the room would like to speak.
I'm Kent Carnell. I live at 5259 Anna Lane in Middleton, which is a long way from this place. So I don't live anywhere near Middleton Beach Road. My son played soccer on those fields many years ago. I've driven past those soccer fields many times on my way to work. To me, it doesn't make any sense to change the zoning from R1 to multifamily use to big apartment buildings. I'm under the criteria used. I was just looking at some criteria from approval of a unit such as this. First of all, any approval should produce significant community benefit. I don't see any significant community benefit to large apartment buildings on this site. We're supposed to consider the character and intensity of the land use, respect the physical attributes of the site, produce attractive environment of sustained aesthetic and ecological desirability, not adversely affect the anticipated provision of school or municipal services, and not create traffic or parking demand incompatible with existing or proposed facilities to serve it. I think the answer, especially you've heard from a lot of people about the traffic that would be on this site or on Allen Boulevard, would be ridiculous. Looking at the economic feasibility and impact, it was supposed to not adversely affect the economic prosperity of the city or the values of the surrounding properties. I think a big apartment building in that area would certainly adversely affect the value of the surrounding properties, especially those on Middleton Beach Road. Also, any development has to look at the preservation maintenance of open spaces. I don't know, see how you have any open spaces with a apartment building that was proposed on that site. So I think I agree with everything that's been said before about the water flow, the traffic, and all those provisions. But both as a Middleton resident, I just cannot see why a big apartment building should be built on that site. There's plenty of spaces on the outskirts of the city or other places where big apartment buildings can be built. That site should remain residential at best. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Connors will be the last person in the room for now. And then Abby and Mark, do you know who's first up on Zoom?
We have Nancy, Lindsay with their hand raised.
Okay, Nancy, you will be after Bill.
See if I can you hear me if I just leave this where it is?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. I'm Bill Connors. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Growth Greater Madison, 25 West Main Street, 5th floor, Suite 33, Madison, Wisconsin. So Smart Growth, we represent real estate developers and businesses involved in real estate development and construction in Dane County. We are a resource to local government policymakers with providing accurate information about the impacts of land use regulations on real estate development and very importantly on the housing supply. I hope you saw the email that about the draft new zoning code, which Mark Opitz forwarded to you yesterday, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about what we're supposed to talk about, which is the proposed comprehensive plan amendment. A number of residents have asked for a delay in adopting the amendment until analysis of stormwater management and traffic management can be completed. And that would be putting the cart in front of the horse. The results of doing stormwater management and traffic and impact analysis almost always is not, don't allow the development. The result is almost always, these things need to be done to make the development work from a stormwater management and traffic management standpoint. And this point, there might be some rough ideas of a concept for a development, but not an actual development proposal. And until you have an actual really hard, fast development proposal, you can't really do an accurate analysis. At best, you're guessing what the proposal is going to be and then doing an analysis on that. If you do analysis at this point in the process, the city taxpayers pay for those studies. If you wait until there's an actually submitted proposal from a developer, the developer pays for the stormwater management engineering. They have to prove that they can meet the standards. And this developer pays for the city experts that evaluate that plan. And the developer pays for the traffic impact analysis study and for the city's experts to evaluate it. So, for right now, we are in a housing crisis throughout Dane County. I mean, there's a housing shortage in Middleton, in Madison, in Sun Prairie, where I live. I was on the city council in Sun Prairie for 5 years and on the plan commission. 30 seconds remaining. So denser housing development is more friendly environmentally because it conserves land. Medium to high density residential development works best, is one of the best places for it is on an arterial or a collector street, because that's not a good fit for low density residential development. You don't want people backing out of their driveways into that higher volume of traffic. So I
ask everyone to be, excuse me, Bill, just 1 minute. We won't count that towards your time. I ask everyone to please be respectful of all the speakers. Thank you.
So I encourage you to approve the comprehensive plan and then let the developer demonstrate that they're keeping the stormwater on site as required and managing the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And now we're going to go to Zoom, starting with Nancy. Lindsay, is there anyone after Nancy who has a hand raised?
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised.
All right, folks on Zoom, if you're interested in speaking, please raise your hand so the staff may call on you. We'll go to Nancy Lindsay, and then I'll ask in the room if there's anybody else who has not spoken and would like to.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nancy Lindsay. My husband and I own a little house west, that is to say uphill from the proposed development. I think it's important that it be understood that there are people not on Middleton Beach Road itself who are very concerned about this proposed development. My husband and I are among them. It sounds to me as if the immediately previous speaker was not aware that there does seem to be a project proposed for this site. We had a lot of reaction to that a few weeks ago at a public open meeting. I was appalled. I think a lot of us were at how little thought seemed to have been given to date at the muck soil that this is to be built on. The idea of putting 2 levels of parking under grade there is laughable. What else has been thought of so little? Traffic, apparently. It feels very much as if the owners understandably want to realize some profit from their land that they own. All the best to them. But at the same time, I would like to respectfully beg them to consider better uses. Perhaps they could consider options for donating or selling, somehow transferring the property to the city. It could be added to conservancy. It could bear their name forever, and many grateful citizens would remember them in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy, could you please state your address for the record?
Yes, we own our little home at 6306 Lakeview Boulevard.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on Zoom?
Beth K has their hand raised on the Zoom.
All right, Beth K. You're next.
Hi, Beth Korosak.
And you're,
72
thank you. Go ahead.
7255 Lily Lane. I'd just like to second. I know that there have been a few people who are not in the direct area, but as somebody who does not live in that area, but somebody who does drive on Allen Boulevard quite frequently, as it is one of the main carrier roads to get to University Avenue, to get anywhere near the UW Hospital, the university itself, as well as downtown Madison. The thought of increased traffic is really quite scary from a safety standpoint, just from the standpoint of getting held up. We've already got a few stoplights going on that road that have been added. As somebody who lives on the far west side of Middleton, we have growth going on both sides of us here off of High Road and what will go off of Parmenter, with some significant building of apartments. I do know that there is a lack of housing. There is a need for housing. Personally, I do not think that Allen Boulevard is a place for that to be added. I think that Allen Boulevard is pretty thick with apartment and condo housing. And I don't see any positive at all from the standpoint of putting something that is large scale, is only going to increase traffic on Allen Boulevard. I see no upside of it. Again, as a couple other people have mentioned, obviously profit, some increased tax revenue for the city. And also, as somebody who lives and backs up to Graber Pond and has seen some flooding in this area, I would imagine, based on what people have seen, I'm not going to speak to this from from a personal standpoint because I don't live there. But knowing that the developments on either side of us, there has been a lot of discussion about how much impervious surfaces will be included in the developments. And I find it hard to believe that there's going to be enough room to provide enough pervious surface in terms of meaning surfaces where the rainwater can be infiltrated rather than flooding either downhill or across into the lake and through the yards of the people who live on the other side, between what would could potentially be development and the lake. I just can't see that happening there. It just doesn't seem possible. So again, as somebody who's just sort of an onlooker, I don't think that it's great for the traffic. I think that traffic's going to increase, as other people have said, with the two developments that are going on over here, with what's going on in Wanakee, what's going on over in Bishop's Bay. I just don't think. Yeah.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to speak?
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak? All right.
Hi, Pat Fraber from 6206 Lakeview Boulevard. We've heard a lot from the Middleton Beach Road residents, and I appreciate all their comments. I agree with a lot of what they said. I just wanted to let you know that also Lakeview Boulevard residents are also very concerned about what's going on in the rezoning. I've kind of counted up the apartments already in a 1 mile radius, new ones going up, and there are at least 13. And that's just in a 1 mile radius that I counted. So I'm hoping that we can put the brakes on this huge complex. And I'm hoping that, I know during the re-election meeting for you guys, I was in the audience, some of you talked about listening to what the residents in the community want. So I'm hoping that you will be listening to what we want. We've been loud and clear of how our feelings are, so please take our views into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak? Anyone else? All right, if not, it is 7:49 and the public hearing is closed. All right, moving on to our agenda. First item is the approval of the minutes of the meeting on September 12th, 2023. Does anybody have corrections to make to the minutes? No corrections to the minutes, so I will declare the minutes to be approved for the meeting on September 12th, 2023. Next on the agenda is the recommendation on comprehensive plan amendment 2, including future land use or flu map changes. I will turn it over to staff to intro this topic.
Thank you.
And
At the August 8th Plan Commission meeting, the Plan Commission referred the draft comprehensive plan amendment 2 changes to 4 different committees for their input. I've included in the memo a summary of the input that we've received from 3 of those 4 committees. The Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Transit Committee has not yet reviewed this item.
Excuse me.
I'm going to ask anyone who's having a conversation in council chambers to please take it into the hallway and And please don't stand right by the door and have the conversation. Thank you.
So the Pedestrian, Bicycle and Transit Committee has not yet reviewed this. I've included the Sustainability Committee recommendation. They recommended that the flu map be referred to the Water Resources Commission for further study before the Allen Boulevard property is rezoned. The Public Works Committee had included some recommendations. There are 3 bullet points listed in the memo. The first one is with regard to an environmental corridor hatching that's shown on a property in the town of Middleton. And our staff would recommend that we keep that environmental corridor as shown. That environmental corridor map is set by the Capital Area Regional Plan Commission. So we literally just pulled their GIS file and overlaid it. But the other 2 recommendations that Public Works Committee made, we would propose including those. And then the Workforce Housing Committee also prepared recommendations. However, 2 of those 3 really pertain more to zoning. So those will be discussed later in the summary of the feedback we've received on zoning. We would agree with their recommendation to add some language about the cost of childcare as it relates to housing affordability. So that's kind of the big picture summary. We have our staff recommendation for the items that we concurred with. And then we would also like to get some additional feedback from the Plan Commission on whether you'd like to wait for the Ped Bike Transit Committee feedback prior to making a recommendation. We discussed it as a staff. They had a very full agenda. They discussed the zoning ordinance as well. So we could wait and put it on the next Ped Bike Transit Committee agenda. However, the changes as they related to their area of expertise and their purview were pretty minimal. And we are going to be working closely with Ped Bike Transit on what we're calling an active modes plan or an active transportation plan. So we could see going either way, and we'll just defer to the Plan Commission whether you would like to wait for their committee to weigh in. And thank you, Jeremy. Sorry. And then second, on the recommendation that came out of the Sustainability Committee about the flu map designation, they had expressed 3 concerns. One being that a rezoning of the property on Allen Boulevard would allow too much increased impervious surface and affect the health of the lake. They also thought that any new development in the shoreland district should improve stormwater management on site, and would like the Water Resources Management Commission to review the flu map change prior to a rezoning. We have asked the Water Resources Commission for their feedback on the zoning ordinance separately, and they have given us guidance. And as it relates to the shoreland district overlay, that would actually not pertain to this property, because this property is not a riparian property adjacent to the lake, and it's not fully within 300 feet of the lake. It is within 1,000 feet of the lake, but that would not, under the DNR model ordinance, which is the ordinance that the Water Resources Management Commission both looked at and recommended, it would not have regulations around the shoreland zoning district overlay pertaining to this lot, just because of the distance from the lake, essentially, and the fact that it's a non-riparian lot. So that was the second thing that we would really like to get guidance from the Plan Commission on as it relates to the feedback that we got from the commissions.
Thank you. So you're asking for direction on 4 things, 3 of which come from Public Works and 1 from Workforce Housing. And you want our feedback on, well, I would, on both Ped Bike and Transit reviewing it and the Water Resources Management Commission.
Correct.
And I would like to suggest a procedural, I have a procedural question.
Okay.
We've received about 10 more registrations in conjunction with the hearing. We didn't announce them, but we didn't ask for any registration specifically. You asked for speakers, but not. So do you want us to list those as part of the record of the hearing as having registered against? They're all, I mean, I don't know how we want to do that.
I would say the hearing is closed. If you want to reflect, because I do have a stack here of people who registered against and they were not read off either.
Okay.
So we'll just.
So I'm just
add-
asking for your,
Yep.
how
We'll
you want,
just-
how do you want us to handle it, I guess is the question.
I would indicate in the minutes who registered against but
That's
did
fine.
not speak.
That's what I was going to do. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, why don't we tackle the second part, the feedback on whether or not to wait for Ped Bike and Transit and Water Resources Management Commission? Anybody feel strongly one way or the other?
As it relates to the Ped Bike Transit, I don't feel that we necessarily need to wait for that commission's inputs. Water Resources, I would feel more comfortable if we did wait for their input.
Okay, and is that because of the fact that the bicycle and pedestrian plan is going to be?
Exactly. That's going to be fully restudied and worked into a future amendment, I'm sure.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I agree with waiting for the water resources review.
Does anyone feel that Ped Bike and Transit that we should wait for them too? Because if we're waiting for Water Resources Management Commission, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Mark, is that okay
Yeah, that's
schedule
perfectly
wise?
fine. I just didn't want us to be the committee to be the only one holding it up, and since we are doing a detailed plan. But if you're waiting for Water Resources, we can certainly take that up.
Okay, so would one of the commissioners like to make a motion to request feedback from Ped Bike and Transit and Water Resources Management Commission in time for our, what meeting would that be?
Probably be our 10/24 meeting.
10/24.
I think the next Ped Bike Transit is 10/12 and Water Resources is 10/18.
Okay. Who would like to move that we request their feedback?
Commissioner Bruce will request feedback from the Ped Bike Transit Committee and the Water Resources Committee on the flu map prior to our October 24th meeting.
Thank you.
Summers will second.
All right, further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. The ayes have it. Moving back to the staff recommendations regarding direction on the items from Public Works and Workforce Housing. I have a question. Can we bring up the current or the proposed flu map? Just so we can see this narrow parcel, because I think I'm the one who raised the question, and it was mainly because I could not tell if it was an intentional, and I think you'll see when you zoom in, it's hard to tell if that is an intentional. Can you zoom in on the
Oh, the property.
the blue stripe? Yeah.
The environmental corridor on the northeast side of the city.
Yep, underneath Red Tail Ridge.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The property
So
in the
that,
town.
I had just asked the question because if you look, it doesn't extend all the way to High Road. It appears to end just a little bit. And it wasn't clear to me at the time what that was supposed to be, what that pattern was.
And we can check in on that again, and also reach out to CARPC and see if there's a reason why it's not extending all the way. Their environmental corridor map is a planning document, but when a project is being proposed, especially if it abuts or is within an environmental corridor, then there's often a more detailed study to provide further guidance for where the corridor should be shown. So we can look at that. We'll have a little bit of time now and we can bring something back with more information on that.
Okay, and I wonder on the same screen, if you look at the property that is south of that blue strip, which is actually in the city of Middleton, that too is an outlot that is undeveloped and right now I think holds a lot of stormwater coming from the west. Do you know if that is in Carpsy's environmental corridor?
Daphne, I would say that it is, but I'll defer to you as our mapping guru.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so this property, yeah, those diagonal green stripes that you see, that delineates the environmental corridor.
Okay, so it's an environmental corridor, but it's also yellow, which is planned neighborhood, and that's just because it's an outlot of an existing, or not planned, existing neighborhood?
Right, yeah. So the environmental corridor is an overlay that goes over, all of our existing zoning. So as you can see in Pheasant Branch, most of it is conservancy, but it kind of has that diagonal striping on it. And so that is also environmental corridor. So it is an overlay, which is slightly different than, our flu map categories and our zoning.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that explanation. Commissioners have any questions or comments on the 4 suggested changes?
Can you pull up the suggested language?
So item 1 is what we just discussed. Can you bring up the proposed changes regarding enhanced crosswalks and also the fair housing? And those might be things that the Pet Bike and Transit Committee will want to look at. Anyone have concerns with the proposed changes? Nope. Right. One thing, I don't know if it's related to the fair housing, but looking elsewhere in the document. Well, I guess I can hold off on that until we make a decision on these 4 items. All right, would anybody care to make a motion regarding the 4 items that Mark or Abby will put back on the screen for us?
Daphne is doing this remotely.
Oh,
from
Daphne,
her
thank you
hotel
so
in
much.
DC.
So the motion would be to accept the 3 changes proposed by the Public Works Committee and the 1 change recommended by Workforce Housing.
Harpo motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Bruce will second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So Alder Haniro, you brought up the map, the yellow shaded area that's in the environmental corridor. That's not ever going to be developed for housing. So is the commission guiding us to changing that from yellow to green, I guess would be, whatever the.
Well, why don't we make the changes that we have a motion for, and then we can come back and discuss that?
Yeah. Okay. I just hadn't thought of it.
Okay. All right. So all those in favor of the motion to approve the 3 changes recommended by the Public Works Committee and the 1, set of changes recommended by Workforce Housing Committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it.
Who was the second on that?
Bruce.
Bruce.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Back to your question, Mark. Do we need to address that or?
Well, not necessarily. I hadn't thought of it like that before, and I haven't worked on this as much as my colleagues here. So I just wanted to see if there was any direction coming from your line of questioning.
I would like to think that that property would not be developed, but I'm mindful of the fact that wetlands no longer have the same status that they used to have. I would leave it up to the rest of the commission if folks are interested. I mean, I know this property well because I walk my dogs along that path. As long as the overlay is clear, and honestly, it was not clear to me that that was overlay. It looked like, I don't know what it looked like, but having it be yellow as established neighborhood made me think it is an area that's suitable for, or on the map, it's suitable for development. And if you know the property, it's really not. Is the blue color something that could be extended to this property?
I think
the blue is the blue unsewered
I think that's townland.
townland.
Is it this kind of light blue that I'm pointing at right now?
Yes.
On the screen. I believe that is actually ag. So for agriculture.
And there is a little stream that runs through that sliver.
Yes. Well, again, I'm okay with it the way it is, as long as it's understood that that is, it would be nice to make that clear that is part of the overlay.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to note in the comprehensive plan, so there are, I don't think I have the page noted, but the height exceptions, well, the staff will go through the comp plan before, or once the zoning code rewrite is nearing its final end, and make sure everything is completely tight, right? Because I noted that the height exceptions in the flu category definitions in the comprehensive plan, they refer to not exceeding X stories except by conditional use. And one of the recommendations that we'll be talking about soon, like right there, neighborhood mixed use, heights not to exceed 5 stories except by conditional use, and it's there elsewhere. One of the things workforce housing talked about is not having conditional use apply, but rather the only way to get those height exceptions would be by adopting affordable housing or sustainability measures. Or at one time we were talking about the stormwater management, but I know the Water Resources Management Commission recommended against that. So I just want to make sure that that's flagged as something that will need to be changed if that recommendation from workforce housing is accepted.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Oh, I did have one more question about the shoreline district zoning. So I just want to make sure that we're referring the comp plan to Water Resources Management Commission specifically to follow up on the Sustainability Committee's request. Did their request include looking at shoreline district zoning?
It did not. No, it was specifically to refer the flu map change for further study before the property is rezoned.
Okay.
The reason that I mentioned the previous action is just to note, because they had said in their recommendation before the property is rezoned, and I wasn't sure if they meant before the property is remapped on the flu map or before it's actually rezoned, but that they had looked at the zoning separately and that this property would not fall within the shoreland district as they have proposed it.
Okay. And you feel like you have enough, it seemed from the memo that there's been enough information coming from Water Resources Management Commission regarding the shoreline district zoning to answer that question. So
Yes.
we're good to go on that. Okay.
Yes, in fact, we met with their staff and our consultant at Vanderwall to go over all of that and make sure that we get all the right language into the ordinance.
Okay, great. And I'm glad you addressed the difference between rezoning and changing the designation on the flu map, because that was a bit confusing to me in some of the public comments talking about rezoning, which requires a whole bunch of stuff to happen versus correcting what I understand to be a mistake on the flu map that is in the that's in the current comp plan. Okay, any further discussion of the comprehensive plan amendment number 2?
How literally should we take the map itself that's in the comp plan?
That is a good question, and I'm glad you raised that because some of the comments that we received were around how the site is divided. So as a reminder to the Plan Commission, on May 9th, our commission discussed the Allen Boulevard property in particular, and our staff was proposing that that property be shown on the future land use map as Avenue mixed use. During the course of that meeting, the Plan Commission determined that the eastern portion should be established neighborhood so that it could provide a transition between the Middleton Beach Road single-family housing and the higher density housing that would occur along Allen Boulevard. We did not know exactly where that line should be drawn. And so the way that we indicated it and proposed it on this flu map is that the depth of the yellow portion of the lot is around the average lot depth for an established neighborhood lot. So that was kind of where we drew the line. But to your point, Commissioner Bruce, the flu map is a planning document. So the flu map and where the line is drawn, it does not need to be as exacting, but once the property is shown on the zoning map and the property is rezoned, that is a legal decision now that entitles, the west part to certain rights and the eastern part to other rights. And that would be done with a legal description. So I don't necessarily think that the exact location of that line is as important on this document because this is a planning document, but once it comes to the zoning map, it will be important that it is clear.
The reason I bring it up at the meeting, I think we kind of just roughly talked about, at least in my, maybe it was, my understanding was kind of more of a 50-50 split, not as it's necessarily represented on this map. And I understand how you got to it. It makes total sense, but I don't want there to be, reliance on this drawing. That would have to be very clear, and it have to be an understanding as we go through any kind of rezoning process that this document is just diagrammatic only. It's
alternatively, because we now have referred the document to other commissions, if there is guidance from the commission that you would like that to be reflected differently, we have time that we could change that on the map as well.
I would ask which meeting are you referring to?
It was a plan commission meeting, I believe,
May
maybe
9th.
before you.
In May?
In May, yeah.
Okay. And I can't recall if you showed the map at the time.
Well, at the time we were proposing, our staff had brought a proposal for Avenue mixed use for the entirety of the site.
Okay.
So it was over the course of that meeting that the commission provided direction to our staff that you would like for the back part to be established neighborhood, but I don't think that we knew exactly where to draw the line.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be able to come back to this on October 24th, correct?
Yes.
And that's good because there are a number of issues that were raised, some of which I found more compelling, others not so much. And so I hope we will have a chance to discuss that line of demarcation and what to do with that particular parcel. I was curious because I know a lot of folks were saying that this neighborhood is single family, low density, but not according to the new zoning code, correct? It's actually high density.
The Middleton Beach Road homes, those are smaller lot, those are single family high density.
Yep, okay.
Yes, those lots are highly developed and they're some of the most highly developed lots in the city. And in fact, if you refer back to the Water Resources Management Commission minutes, some of those lots have up to 65% impervious surface. And part of the impetus for the zoning change is because we have so many variance requests along that street because the lots are very narrow. And so they oftentimes are not able to meet the setback requirements. So those would be classified as single family high.
Okay.
Commissioner Erdman Hermans has her hand
Oh,
raised.
go ahead.
I just want to put it out there that the loss of Captain Bill's to the neighborhood, I think, has been a significant impact to the community there. And that I would encourage maybe considering like the neighborhood mixed use instead of a demarcation of established and avenue. Neighborhood mixed use would allow something like, you know, a 5-story apartment building where the top floor were a restaurant that the community could use and would be able to see over the houses on Middleton Beach Road. I'm concerned that our idea of the avenue mixed use there, while well-intentioned with the public transit in mind, was perhaps not carefully considering the neighborhood scale and needs, as well as just the people driving by and viewing the lake. Like, the lake has so much character to Middleton, right? Is Middleton a community built on a lake, or is that lake just for the people that live on it and can see it? I mean, why do we call Lakeview Park Lakeview Park? If we're going to build a 7-story apartment building, we can't see the lake anymore from Lakeview Park. And I'm just sitting here listening to all the comments about the redevelopment of Middleton Beach Street or Road or whatever it's called, to be pedestrian friendly without sidewalks, and thinking, yeah, while the intention is good there, perhaps we need to reconsider how this new area of development could possibly best serve the loss of the Captain Bill's, preserve more of the neighborhood character, and maybe that neighborhood mixed use would be a better designation for the whole site, which would allow greater options for a developer instead of having it in 2 different categories. So I'm just throwing that out there because I'm thinking about it now.
Thank you for that comment. I had a question about Middleton Beach Road. I did not understand the concern about increased traffic on Middleton Beach Road, considering it is a cul-de-sac. Correct?
I'm sorry, which is the
Middleton
cul-de-sac?
Beach Road is
Yes.
a cul-de-sac, so
On the
it's
north,
not a, and there's no proposal to make it a through street.
No, in the past, there have been, and that was very widely opposed by the neighborhood.
Other thoughts from commissioners?
I want to follow up on Gretchen's comment. Gretchen, I think that there is some logic to the neighborhood mixed use designation, at least a consideration of that. I've also been trying to give input that perhaps as it's currently written, the neighborhood mixed use doesn't maybe allow for quite enough intensity of use. And I think we need something that might be less than avenue mixed use, but maybe more than what neighborhood mixed use is currently right now. And, but I would still think that we'd want to have a buffer on the Middleton Beach Road side. Something that would be closer in scale to, what's existing there now.
Thank you. Other comments?
Commissioner Erdman Hermans has her hand raised.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was still on mute. Yeah, I'm hearing that like the buffer would be great. But one idea would be like the previous developer had planned in an environmental buffer on that side of the area of the lot. But if we zoned that as single family residential or established neighborhood, would the developer still pursue putting an environmental buffer there? And I think that environmental buffer would be a great benefit as well. So that's just a question I have about splitting the lot into different designations.
Okay. And then looking at the density under the proposed zoning code, the density of neighborhood mixed use is 10 dwelling units per acre. Is that no?
Oh, I'm sorry, density you said.
Yes. Well, I don't want to take too much time on this because we are going to be discussing the zoning code.
Yes, 10.
So we can talk about that.
The answer is
then.
yes.
The answer is yes, it is 10. So that's actually lower than the single family high. So that would be, I think, a missed opportunity to bring more density to an area that's got transit service. I agreed that putting single family homes right on Allen Boulevard, I can't imagine anybody wanting to have a home right there on such a busy street. So, okay. Well, these are all good topics for us to discuss on October 24th when we pick this up again. So if there are no further comments on the recommendation regarding the comprehensive plan amendment 2, including the flu map changes, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the draft zoning ordinance, chapter 10, the lighting code, chapter 33, and zoning map. And we are to provide guidance based on committee feedback and additional staff input, and also schedule a public hearing.
Thank you, Chair Haniro. In your packet is a memo from September 22nd, which outlines or has 12, identifies 12 areas where committees suggested some additional guidance. In some cases, there were some conflicts between committee recommendations, so I thought it would be useful to take those 12 and walk through those here today. The first one is single family zoning districts. The Ped Bike Transit Committee and Workforce Housing in particular had discussions about the exclusionary nature of single family zoning. So the question is, should the code allow duplex, twin house, and 2 flat land uses in all SR districts, which are the single family? There's the 3 low, medium, and high density. Should a single family dwelling only be allowed as a conditional use in a 2-family residential district? So, and feel free to expand on that question. It's just, these are just meant to be conversation starters.
Commissioner Bruce?
Sure. I think we had a discussion at Workforce Housing about making sure that duplex housing, 2-family housing could be built in the established neighborhoods that were zoned as single-family residential. I think that was kind of clear in the comp plan, but it wasn't clear in the zoning code. And I think after discussion, we talked about whether it should be as a permitted use or a conditional use, and I think we landed on a conditional use.
That's correct.
But I'm interested to hear what other commissioners feel.
Maybe it would be helpful, Commissioner Bruce, the single family zoning. What we allow there are single family dwelling units, individual family living arrangements, outdoor open space, institutional, passive outdoor and active outdoor recreation, et cetera, essential services, community gardens. As a conditional use in our proposed single family districts, we would allow boarding house, living arrangements, bed and breakfast, and community living arrangements for 9 to 15 residents. So what I'm hearing you say is we would add the 2 family units as well, both duplex and flats as conditional uses.
Yes.
Okay.
Was there I guess maybe I want to ask staff, was there an intention to exclude that, or was it just a kind of a part of the process? It just didn't happen yet.
I would say that we've been working with the consultant and a template that they have used in various communities around Wisconsin that they are tailoring for our use. The zoning ordinance overall is very dated, and so our focus has been to overhaul the zoning ordinance. In terms of when it came to the zoning map, applying the single family provisions in the ordinance to the map, we didn't want to, what we're proposing is largely keeping things the same and finding matches that match both the comprehensive plan, the flu map, and the existing zoning, so that we aren't, rocking the boat too much.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, if the commission feels that the comprehensive plan and the goals of the city to have greater infill housing and more housing opportunity, more opportunities for affordable housing, et cetera. If you feel that, one way to do that would be to add the 2 family zoning as a conditional use.
Right.
2 family land uses, excuse me. So I have no objection to that. And, we're here to get guidance from you. So it wasn't that we intentionally said, oh, we don't feel that that's appropriate. It's just, we just kind of went with what's
status quo. Yeah.
Essentially.
Okay.
Okay. What I would like to do, since we've got 12 recommendations from other committees, what I thought we could do is go through the list of 12, and unless someone has an objection, when the time comes, we'll vote on that whole set. But if somebody does object to any of these items, we can take them off the list and consider them separately. So
But these are all phrased as questions, so that's why I'm not
Correct.
sure. Okay. All right.
So, so on the question of should the code allow duplex, twin house, and 2 flat land uses in all single family or single residential districts? And then the flip side is, should single family dwellings only be allowed as a conditional use in the 2 family residential district? The reason for that was simply to, again, try to preserve or increase density and eliminate the possibility of somebody who would buy 2, a duplex and tear it down so that they could put up a larger house than they'd be able to find space for somewhere else. And we thought having both of those be conditional uses would be good because it would open up discussion and get the feedback from neighborhoods. So does anybody object to item number 1, accepting the recommendation?
Commissioner Erdmann Hermans has her hand.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think there's a big difference between whether you allow something as a conditional use in a new development versus an established development. So in neighborhoods that are already developed under the zoning codes of, or the ordinances of single family, people have made an investment on what that is, right? Where they are with all those considerations. And that's different than going in to build a new house in a development that has a different set of parameters on what can be established in that neighborhood. So it might be upsetting for an established neighborhood to have a tear down and a rebuild to a 2 flat. But if you were going to build in a new neighborhood and you knew that 2 flats could be built, then you know that going in. And so I think that there's a difference whether, how can these be conditionally applied?
I agree that there is a difference. in perception. And for that reason, we decided not to make it a permitted use, but rather a conditional use.
Gretchen, I think that if we're serious about trying to increase our infill housing, we've got to open up some additional options. We've got quite a bit of single family zone parcels. And I know throughout there are certainly communities that are just getting rid of single family zoning entirely.
And like, why aren't we moving towards that? Or why do we still have side lots, right? If you go to Europe, people build their houses right up next to one another, and they have buses all through all of the, small communities because there's enough density to support that. So if we're serious about bringing buses to communities, not having a bus stop a mile or 2 miles away from, your residence, then we need to get rid of the side lots in new housing. We need to make the lots smaller. We need to, if we care about having green, we stop using, stick construction and we build with concrete and high density insulation, and we build the houses close together, and that's how we get buses there. I mean, if we're serious about it, let's be serious about it. I mean, putting 5 duplexes into a neighborhood of 700 is not going to change anything.
Well, the word for us was incremental, because we did on workforce housing, we did talk about possibly recommending that we eliminate single family housing. And we concluded that we did not think Middleton was ready for such a move. Other thoughts on single family zoning districts? Item number 1.
I think the conditional use is a good way to handle this issue.
Commissioner Erdman Hermans, can you support making these a conditional use, or would you rather we pull this one from our consent agenda?
Well, I support making it a conditional use, but on what conditions? I mean, I don't think we have good conditions set for this, so I think that needs to be established. In the future planning commissions, what are they going to base that on? I get the impression that residents don't feel like the communities are being listened to, that the commission just wants to have more and more density, and they'll do anything to put it there. And this is going to just be seen as just a way to suit the committee's agenda, even though I know that that's not how we operate. We all know that's not how we operate, and that we don't have an agenda other than supporting the goals, of the whole community. But that's how it's going to be seen. I can already predict it.
I'd be happy to discuss with our consultant any suggested conditions for, approaches that they've seen in other communities for making these conditional uses, both in a single family, the SR category, and then also the converse is to allow single family only as a conditional use in the 2 family. I can talk with our consultant if that's what you'd like us to do, to see if there's any sort of standards that they would see, but otherwise.
I appreciate that offer, and I guess I'll take you up on it. I'd be curious. I think Commissioner Erdman Hermans raises an interesting point, and that is, do we have a listing of all the conditional use criteria for every action, every proposal that would be permitted under conditional use? I haven't seen it, if there is one.
In the back, there's a section on conditional use procedures. It's on, find it this quickly. Well, actually, I will. It's in the table of contents.
Daphne might be able to.
Yeah, she's doing a search. No, the conditional uses are in Article 10, Section 10.10.32, conditional use permit procedures. That might not, and I don't think gets into standards as much. The standards oftentimes are listed Well, I'd have to go review that. It's been a while since I've looked at that section, but we do have 7 pages devoted to conditional use procedures.
Okay.
So I can follow up with more information if you'd like, but if there's interest or a general consensus to move to shift our code to incorporate what workforce housing discussed, we can work towards that and I can report back at the next meeting.
I think that would be great. And, I strongly advocate for this because I think it brings parity between the two types of housing. It does. I was disappointed when I saw that single family housing was going to be a part of our new zoning code because it is exclusionary. I just finished reading Matthew Desmond's book, Poverty by America, and he comes right out and says it. So, and as a member of the Workforce Housing Committee, like Commissioner Bruce, I would say that committee's agenda is to increase affordable housing options. And I recognize that many neighborhoods would object to somebody building a duplex in the middle of an established neighborhood. Personally, I don't object. I think that is how, I think that's fine. I actually have been behind where I live. There are a lot of duplexes that you would never guess are duplexes. So I appreciate, Mark, your offer to consult our consultant and come to us with some guidance on conditions that could apply. Let's move on to number 2, residential densities of certain multifamily land uses. And this one too came from Workforce Housing, and Commissioner Bruce, I wonder if you would be willing to address this one.
Sure. I had brought up at the committee the fact that I felt like the density levels that were stated in the low density and medium density and mixed use neighborhood were lower than I felt was really practical. And I, at the same time, we talked about whether those densities were maximums or whether they were just kind of approximations, what they felt like the densities would be there. And that was not clear to the commission. So I'd ask you that question first, Mark.
So my understanding is that all of these, I should preface, the intent statements list approximate gross densities. And it's my understanding that the numbers you see there reflect what the table then on the next page indicates what you could do with a lot depth and lot width of certain dimensions combined with the setback standards and what that would lead to as a natural density for the zoning district. So the two of them are together. That's my understanding of how they relate to each other. And that makes sense to me. So if you take a 20-foot front setback in a multifamily residential medium density, if you take a 20-foot front setback and the side setbacks and the rear setbacks and apply that to what the lot width, minimum lot width and minimum lot depth is, and let's say someone had the minimum lot width, lot depth and the max, put the maximum building you could get on that density is that number, the approximate density that's under intent. Yeah. That's my understanding of how that works.
Of course, as you know, what's going to happen here is we're going to have, if that's the case, we're going to have some conflicting scenarios. Somebody's going to come in with a presentation or a proposal for smaller dwelling units that meet all the requirements, but might be double that density that's listed as approximate gross densities. And then we're going to have a discussions what that really means.
I'm not so concerned about when the words are read approximate gross densities. I'm not as concerned about that being a legal obstacle as the specific numbers that are in the tables. I can discuss that also with our consultant if they've seen that problem manifest itself elsewhere. But if somebody in something that's intended to be 20 dwelling units an acre and they come in with 28 dwelling units an acre because they did all efficiencies, I don't see that as being incompatible with the zoning district as long as they're meeting all the setback and the dimensional standards. I guess that's how I would look at it as zoning administrator, but I can double check on that.
Yeah, and we'll also have our neighbors are going to be looking at it as from maybe a different perspective as they read it. They may feel differently about that. So
Right. Yeah, I think the most important thing is defining what this means and what the requirement is, if there is one.
but in any event, Mark, I guess my thoughts were that I would hope that we were getting higher densities than what the approximate gross densities were listed at, because I think those are inadequate, really. At least that's my thought.
So what I will do based on that feedback is ask our consultant to revisit the dimensional standards and bulk regulations tables. Should I go with, I guess what I can do is go with the numbers that I list that are listed in the memo based on what workforce housing recommended. So 8 units, 8 gross dwelling units per acre, increasing that to 14. And how does that affect the numbers in the table? I'll have that discussion with
You could, and keep in mind that the numbers that workforce housing came up with were really my numbers that I threw out there because I was trying to kind of quickly determine what made sense related to the other densities that were in the code. And a desire to try to increase densities, throughout the city. So I don't think those are necessarily, maybe they're not the appropriate targets, but they felt like they were maybe a little bit closer than what was initially proposed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mark, you're going to investigate with the consultant what more adequate densities would be. Because Commissioner Bruce indicated that the 8, 20, and 10 were inadequate. So I think workforce housing generally agreed with the numbers, but the bottom line is the proposed densities in the original draft are insufficient. They need to go up.
Yeah.
So Mark will come back with well-considered densities and a recommendation for how to define what that density number means. Any comments, questions, suggestions from other commissioners on this one? I appreciate that you added the table showing the different densities. I think that's an important piece to have. Okay, item number 3 is the height exception and the density bonus approach. Commissioner Bruce. And this is a workforce housing.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we were trying to figure out how did you get the conditional use bonus height or the bonus heights, or when at what point do you get additional height? And we wanted to make sure that there was truly an incentive for affordable housing to get the additional height, and maybe not to allow it for other items, other things. I think Alderman Arrow talked about sustainability, making sure that we kept something for sustainability too. So, and then the question is are they additive? Is a bonus floor and you get it either route? So I think that's a matter of discussion.
Thank you.
And if I may expand that briefly, because there's been also some additional criteria that were suggested, for example, sustainability features, and that builds on what you were saying, Commissioner Bruce. I know we also have had concern raised about bird-friendly glass and the legal standing of that in Madison. So what we did in response to that is change the language in the code from required to recommend and have it be an optional process at this point. So I just want to add that to your discussion.
I'm all in favor of bird-friendly glass, but I don't think that rises to the same level as providing affordable housing for our residents. I would say of the sustainability measures mentioned, the net zero design buildings is big. And I could imagine giving the height bonus to developers who come up with those types of buildings. Dark sky lighting standards, isn't our lighting ordinance being rewritten to reflect dark sky? the model ordinance. So I would say net zero buildings and affordable housing would be the two.
And are they?
And are they additive?
Are they additive?
I think it would have to depend on the base zoning, because if it's, if it's already a tall building, adding 2 or even 4 more stories might not be as much of a concern as if it's in a 5-story. I don't know. What would the consultant do?
Commissioner Erdmann Hermans has her hand.
Oh, thank you.
I also wonder, so just throwing up one more question, would those be subject to step backs for those additional stories? Then perhaps that's a way that you can make them additive and not so imposing, is that they're each required to have a step back. And then one comment I had would be to perhaps add another incentive. I would really like to see the things people need in their neighborhoods. And if these are going to be mixed use buildings, an incentive to pull in a long-term lease for something the community needs, like a pharmacy, a small grocery store, a daycare, these types of things that people need in order to have a livable, workable, walkable neighborhood. These are the kinds of things that are going to make that work. And I just haven't seen these kinds of leases going into any of the new buildings, which is really disappointing. So I think that might be an incentive as well. A 10-year lease for a pharmacy would be a huge impact to the entire community. That makes it, worthwhile for the community to feel like that was a good new development in their area.
I agree. I just wonder how enforceable that is.
My initial thought was, and maybe this is, I don't know the answer to this question, but would somebody sign a lease to a building that's in the planning stages? Because we would have to make these decisions about whether or not to give them additional height during that planning stage. And is the developer going to come in here? Yep, we already have that person, this business signed down for this project, when we're having to make a decision on whether or not to grant these bonus floors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree with the sentiment. I wonder if there's a different type of incentive that the city can offer to developers like that, especially, when you said daycare, I right away thought of the recommendation from Workforce Housing on the comp plan about affordable daycare. So perhaps
Exactly. If you have to drag your kid to daycare on the bus before getting yourself to work on the bus and walk a half a mile to your bus stop, I mean, it's just, it's unfeasible to get, people to take public transit when that's the lifestyle here, especially when you have to pay the premium to live in Middleton. So we need to bring these features into neighborhoods. And that brings me back again, just to go back up to point 1 of the single family residential. I don't see anything in that area that allows for small standalone businesses in neighborhoods. I really wonder if we just need more mixed use residential in general. That why are we planning more single family residential? So
okay. All right, so but definitely the step backs are.
And the answer to that is we do require step backs in certain zoning districts at a certain height, and those would take precedent. So those would apply to any additional stories.
Okay. So then we still have the question of how many stories would we allow? And is that so granular that we can't really do that now, but rather defer to the staff to come back to us with a.
And if I may, the other question related to that is, do you build that into the conditional use process for those projects? So for example, mixed the multifamily medium and multifamily high have conditional uses. Let's stick with the medium. normally the height, maximum height permitted by right is 4 stories, but you're allowed to go up to 5 stories with the conditional use. Would you link that conditional use to the incentives that you've been discussing tonight? Or would that be, are they on top of that? So I guess that's
No.
part of the nuance here too.
The recommendation from workforce housing was the only way to get the additional height would be,
To link the two explicitly.
yes.
Okay, that's good to know because I didn't pick up on that directly from the.
Yeah,
minutes.
because our thinking was that if a developer could just go the usual route and persuade the plan commission to grant the conditional use permit, they would go that route instead of investing in the affordable housing or the sustainability measures.
And what I heard tonight, Alder Haniro, is that the themes that you would like to see that are significant and, weight substantive enough are the affordable housing component and the net zero constructability or construction, I should say. Are those two then, I'm sorry?
The net zero design buildings.
Right.
Mhm.
And have those be the only two, which I can see the merit in that instead of allowing some of these other features that are more minor, and especially stormwater. I wasn't so sure that was a good idea. And water resources, by the way, did not think that was a good idea.
Yeah, so just the two. Members, commissioners agree to that?
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I support that.
and so the only other wrinkle with that is those are 2 conditions that each allow for an additional story, but for multifamily medium, there's an allowance to allow 1 additional story. So that 1 additional story would stick and you could choose one or the other. There's no reason why you can't do both, but you would only get
Right.
1 story, period. You wouldn't get anything above that.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to number 4, live work building.
I just had a question on the economics of that for the developers. Do you know how much extra work it is to get the workforce housing in a building? Like, is it economically worthwhile for them to go through the extra effort with only 1 story, or do we know that?
I think they're going to have to pair that incentive with other incentives that they're getting. It won't be enough on its own.
So do we need to make it 2 stories in order to get it? Because I feel like it's such an important thing for our city to have, and we want the density anyway. So I want to make sure we're making it economically worthwhile enough that it's actually something that can happen, that it's feasible.
Well, I think 2 stories would be allowed in other zoning districts than the one that Mark just mentioned.
Yes, in the high density, we would allow, well, I have a comment on that later. This might be a good time to discuss it, but out of the gate, we were saying 5 stories as a permitted use, but then allowing as many as 5 more stories as a conditional, but I was going to suggest tonight that you lower that to 8 stories as a cap.
Mm-hmm.
We did get some feedback from Mr. Connors. Connor, yeah. Thank you. I was thinking Colin for a second, who emailed saying that he hoped that would stay at 10 stories. But anyway, so there's obviously difference of opinions here, but that's the only one that allows more than 1 story as an addition, at least in the multifamily category. I'd have to get back to you on the mixed use.
Does that address your concern, Commissioner Bergman Hermans?
Yes, thank you.
So we're saying, but right, we'll have to be a little bit careful with that, because the affordable housing right now, the bonus is a certain percentage of the floor has to be affordable housing. And if we're giving multiple floors for affordable housing, then we'd have to adjust the language accordingly, if I understand what she's getting at.
Yes, and also because of the step backs, I wonder if we want to specify, like the way it is written right now, it's the additional height. It's a percentage of the additional height, but if your additional height is a smaller footprint than the lower units, I think we may want to specify that you have, for affordable housing, you have to consider 50% or whatever I think it's 50% of the additional height, but it's got to be the base. Does that make sense? Because those apartments aren't going to be at the top. They're going to be somewhere else. And I think to maximize the number of square feet for affordable housing, we wouldn't want to have it be a step back floor that's used in the calculation. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but typically in a building that's income restricted, where it's only a portion of the units, we would allow them to flex within the building, because that way, if a tenant exceeds the income level, rather than kicking a tenant out of the quote unquote affordable unit, they would instead allow them to stay, raise their rent to market rate, and instead designate another unit as the
Sure,
affordable.
and that's fine. I'm just talking about the square footage of affordable units that they would have to provide.
Yep.
Should be based on the maybe not the largest floor, but not the smallest floors.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay, that makes sense. And just one more point I wanted to make is that with the density bonuses, this is an opportunity for the city to prioritize and provide an incentive for things that we want to see. And as kind of policies and priorities shift over time, those could also change. And so with the density bonus, it might be something where every year we want to take a look at how it's working. And, we have a lot of meetings with developers when they're coming in, we'll, share that as an offering. And if we're hearing a hard no for affordable housing from every single one, then we can bring that feedback back to you and maybe look at changing that in the future.
Okay.
I imagine we'll be getting some feedback in the next few days from our audience participant.
Yes. So moving
Yes,
on
you.
to item number 4, live work building. Mark or Abby, do you want to explain this one? I think this sounds like it's getting at what Commissioner Urban Hermans has been bringing up.
Yeah, this also came up from the chair of our Ped Bike Transit Committee, just to help make neighborhoods more walkable and bikeable, just to have a mix of land uses. So some of these overlap.
So the answer to the question, should any commercial land uses be added to this list? The short answer would be yes.
Yes, and what they are.
What they are is TBD. All right.
Well, I think essential services, right? So what do people need every day? If you're handicapped and you can only walk a quarter mile, right? That's a quarter mile is a designation for a food desert. If you have to walk beyond a quarter mile to get to a bus or the grocery store itself, you're in a food desert. Like most of Middleton is a food desert. We just aren't a walkable community. So what do we need every day? We need to be able to pick up our prescriptions. We need to be able to, gather as communities with our coffee and our kids and our dogs and our bikes and get groceries, and those are the things we need. So what are the essential services, right? We don't have a medical clinic.
If I can just clarify, Gretchen, Commissioner Urban Herman.
Against
services defined on page 137 of our ordinance under institutional land uses. And I'm using the term because I agree with you, what you listed, those are essential services as well, but essential services in the ordinance are focused on public utilities and related, related. So I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to explain that I understand your list of essential services is broader.
I love gathering around the water tower and listening to the hum of the electric grid. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay, so the live work building question, yes, we do want commercial land uses added, and we don't know exactly what those are, but they could be described as essential services in the plain English meaning of the word. And we'll let staff come to us with the list.
Maybe call them community services or neighborhood services or something like that. That actually, I very much appreciated that conversation just now, because that's something I've kind of struggled with too, because I sort of have a broader definition of essential services. So maybe neighborhood commercial services or something like that.
We'll move on to item number 5, and commissioners, I am aware of the time and I recognize that we have more on our agenda than we can possibly get through in a reasonable amount of time. But I would like to try to get through at least these 12 items and then set the hearing date if we're at that point, and punt the rest to our next meeting. Okay, so exterior building design standards. Is this for the ADUs?
Yeah, well, it's
Accessory
there's
buildings.
accessory buildings, not just ADUs, but anything over 150 square feet.
I can take it if you
Go
want.
ahead.
This came from CDA, and they were concerned that, especially as it pertains to accessory dwelling units, that there are, well, for one, accessory dwelling units are going to be extraordinarily hard for any homeowner to finance and build. They're expensive. So a lot of people are really excited about the idea. In other communities, even when they've made them permitted uses, they're very, very difficult, and they're seeing very few permits for them. So what the CDA was proposing is that we should limit the barrier of entry by allowing some of the more prefabricated models where you pour a foundation, but it's a kit and it makes it a little bit less costly. They still meet the building code requirements, but they may not match the principal structure. And they actually viewed that as a positive because they like the more eclectic nature of like some of the neighborhoods that developed over many decades, like downtown Middleton, where not all the homes look super similar. And so they thought that we should strike the requirement for matching the principal structure on the lot.
All right, thank you for that
What is
background.
CDA?
Community Development Authority. So thoughts from commissioners?
That's fine. That's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I can support it.
Agreed.
And then
Commissioner Erdman Hermans?
No strong feelings either way.
Okay. All right, moving on to off-street parking standards, number 6. Actually, we have 2. First one is number 6. This was PUD, Bike and Transit and Workforce Housing.
Right.
Want to leave it to the market to decide what parking minimum should be. So we proposed eliminating the required minimum off-street parking for certain land uses, specifically residential and mixed use. Thoughts?
Staff, how would staff feel about this? Do you feel like we're going to be opening ourselves up to developers proposing projects with no parking or parking that's severely inadequate? I guess that's a question I have.
Yeah, I'd have to do more research into what the experience is in other communities. I can understand the logic in terms of a developer wants to be able to have their project be successful. They want to be able to keep their leases,
Full.
they don't want to have whatever it was, how many vacancies we heard today. They don't want that. So in that sense, they have a built-in incentive. We know with the Middleton Shores project, they wanted more parking than we thought was necessary. So they obviously felt that that's important. So I can see how the market would respond to and self-regulate. But at the same time, I can think of examples of, downtown Middleton comes to mind. We don't require downtown parking downtown, and we hear complaints from people, but obviously it's just a few people, and the downtown's wildly popular, and people are willing to walk 2 or 3 blocks. So that's the other extreme. That's an example of where we don't have minimum parking required. So I don't have an opinion on this because we had built into the ordinance a minimum standard, and some of the maximums are linked to the minimum. So that's not the end of the world. We can simply come up with, a hard number as the maximum or percentage. So I can do more research on this. I just wanted to know what the policy guidance is.
My initial thought was we're in a housing shortage. People are desperate for housing. Who has the leverage in a situation like that? It's the property owners, right? The landlords. So if we get rid of minimums, the landlords are going to like, well, we're going to build housing because people need it and we're going to eliminate the parking. And what are the renters going to do about it? Because because there's not a whole lot of choices for places for people to live right now. Especially in this county, the fastest growing county in the state by far. So what I see it is the market would say, well, we've got the renters kind of, they're going to have to do what we tell them to do almost. And, good luck finding another place to live that's cheaper. Or and that's where I'm kind of worried about getting rid of minimums, is you're going to start to see this, the market reacting and like, well, what choice do renters have?
I guess on the flip side of your argument, and I know that it came up at Ped Bike Transit, is that those costs for those parking stalls are all built into the rent. And so if you do want an affordable unit and you don't have a vehicle, you're paying for that parking stall either way. I think I maybe have a more radical view about parking, which is that I think that on-street parking should be welcomed in areas where it's permitted, because that's pavement that already exists. And so why pave something else for another parking stall off-street if it's not absolutely necessary? But I also think from all the meetings that I have with developers, including one that I just had today with a Madison-based development group that manages 600 apartments and was looking at a site near downtown Middleton. I asked them about parking and they said, oh, we would have to build it because the market demands it. And it would really be dependent on who their target market is. So what they had relayed to me is if they're targeting an older population, they're going to have more off-street parking per unit because in their experience, that is the requirement. So I personally don't think you're going to see a lot of proposals coming in where they're saying zero parking. And I think that the area where you're really going to have the biggest crunch is in downtown Middleton. And that's because there already is a perception that there's not adequate parking in the downtown. And that already is not having a minimum requirement under the current ordinance. So
you're comfortable then with maybe just, okay.
I comfortable with what?
With eliminating the minimum?
Okay.
No, I'm not comfortable eliminating the minimum.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable completely eliminating it either. And I guess how does ADA play into something like this?
How does what?
ADA would play into,
That was my question too, because I thought that was a percentage of the parking and we can't go without that.
I think it's worth re-examining what the minimums are and perhaps, reducing, but I don't think we should completely eliminate it.
Okay. So the proposal then, instead of eliminating the minimums, reducing them, asking the staff to come back with a proposed reduction?
I would note that this is already a reduction from what we had. I
think we just leave it be and then we can deal with it development by development as we have been. I don't think it's been that difficult to deal with.
Well, the question is do we want to allow projects with parking levels less than the minimum that are listed right now? Because that's what we're really asking. Are there places where that would happen that would be appropriate? And
yeah, I think that's a good question, and I don't know how to answer that until I see the specifics of that project.
Okay.
Wouldn't, if in the rare case a developer wanted no minimum, wouldn't they be able to apply for a variance and then just discuss it with us at that time?
Staff?
I'm sorry, I'm doing a couple different things.
A developer who wanted to go below the minimum could request a variance.
There is language in the code.
I got several things I want to report to you right now. there's a sentence that allows on maybe, do you have the ordinance? Oh, yeah, she does have it. Right before the table, Daphne, I think is a sentence that I want to highlight right there, number 7. The parking requirements listed in the next table can be reduced by up to 50% as determined by the
There we
plan
go.
commission
Yeah.
through. So that process is already built
Right.
in there.
Okay.
And what I wanted to share is that the current city standard for off-street parking, let's talk about residential uses. We require one parking space for an efficiency unit or lodging room. But once you have a 1-bedroom unit, we currently require, according to our code, the current code, 1.5 parking spaces. For a 2-bedroom unit and above, we require 2 parking spaces. The new code is 1 parking space per dwelling unit, regardless of number of bedrooms. So it's already a significant reduction in that case. So to ask, if you're asking me to lower that further, I would need to know what you want me to go for, but given,
0.75.
but given that, yeah, but given that the language is here, as you saw on the table that Daphne just showed, given that that language is there, I think we still have that discretion. So I'm actually really pleased with how, I thought this was a reasonable and pretty progressive approach already. And then the last comment I want to make is what Commissioner Urban Herman said. We'd want to make sure that obviously ADA requirements are based on the number of spaces provided. And so at some point, if you're not providing enough spaces, you still need to have certain ADA requirements. So I think we don't necessarily want that linked to as a percentage. I'd have to research that a little further, but we want to make sure that we still can have accessible living spaces and shopping spaces.
Okay, could you go up to the previous sentence that we just looked at?
Yeah.
So I can live with the standards as they're written. I'm wondering that 50% is rather arbitrary. Do we need to specify an amount?
So just say can be reduced as determined by the plan commission and just strike the up to 50%. I don't have a problem with that.
Well, the one thing about the 50% is it shows an intent that you could get a 50% reduction through the conditional use process.
But would we not allow them to,
Do no burden.
yeah,
25%.
or do like 80%? I feel like we would. And if they can.
Yeah,
make the
but I think
case.
what Commissioner Bruce is suggesting is if we don't have any, they would think that they couldn't as easily get up to 50. I think that's what you said.
That's why I wanted to make sure that people,
Right,
and not just applicants, but
Yeah.
future plan commissioners
right.
But
understood
could
that.
it just say can be reduced or eliminated as determined by the plan commission?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
There you go.
That
that
would be good.
helps. Good idea.
Okay, so item number 6, our decision is to keep the standards as written, but change the conditional use. Item number 7, change it to say can be reduced or eliminated. Got it. Item number 7, off-street parking standards as recommended by the Sustainability Committee. Staff.
So this has to do with electric vehicle parking spaces. We've updated definitions already as in the code. I can't remember. I don't think that was in the new code. I think that's just in our working draft. So the feedback that we've gotten is that the proposal, the goal to install 10% charging infrastructure in all new multifamily parking, but wire 20% as EV ready, was suggested by the Sustainability Committee. I know that there's been some concern from the development community about that, is that it's overkill, would increase rents for residential tenants. So I guess we wanted some guidance as to, and maybe Abby, you can help me flesh this out too. I'm not an expert on EV spaces. Maybe you know a little more, but it's too bad Kelly isn't available today to address this, but.
Yeah, I think the concern was just how quickly, the concern that was expressed to us by the development community was how quickly the conversion would happen and whether requiring the installation of raceways in advance of actually offering the charging stations would add costs to the project and whether it would be embraced quickly enough to make use of that infrastructure.
Do we specify numbers now
We don't have a requirement.
in the rewritten code?
Oh, and I'm sorry, no, in the current code is what I was referring to.
In the proposed code, what's it, how does the proposal read right now?
It's on the screen. We have the electric vehicle parking requirements. I think there's something ahead of that too, Daphne.
And was this based on
Kelly is
Madison's?
Yeah, is Kelly available actually, Daphne? Not to put her on the spot.
I'll go knock on her door and see if she'll come out.
Don't do that.
She's not part of the meeting.
She's
Sorry.
probably asleep.
Yeah, right.
It's an hour later there.
So can you scroll up a little, please? Here we go. So
Yeah, this is.
So I'm trying to figure out, so the sustainability committee is recommending the same 10%, if you go to the next page, the same 10%, but they want an additional 20% wired as EV ready.
I think up to 20% total, right?
That's
The
how I
way I
feel.
read it was another 10%.
Yeah.
Another 10%.
For a total of 20. That's the way I read it,
Yeah.
but maybe I'm not reading it right.
I mean, I would love, just as an EV owner, I would love to see 20, but I don't think that that's feasible. When you're talking multifamily, if you have 100 I mean, to have 20 of them. And it's not like you're using them every day. I would assume these are not level 1 chargers, which are essentially useless. If you have a
by
level 2
20
charger, you're
By
charging it.
2040, we'll have planes, right? We'll be flying around.
There you go.
cars.
So the definitions that we've added are that an EV ready parking space is provided with an electrical panel capacity and space to support a minimum 40 ampere 208/240 volt branch circuit, etc. Electric vehicle installed parking space is served by minimum level 2.
So under the way it's written now, they could have no actual installed EV chargers, but just have 10% of the spaces would be ready. I think that's a problem. Could we specify 5 and 10%, 10 and 20%, 15 and 30?
So modify the chart to specify what would be required to be installed now with level 2 chargers.
Yes.
Okay. So we could put together percentages and bring them back to.
I do
as a
think we have to be careful. We just talked about how parking in general was market driven.
Mhm.
And now we're taking a somewhat different approach with the EV. And we're also working to try to make sure that our housing is affordable. So we have to balance this. I just want to be cautious that we're not asking to install. I think developers will absolutely install charging stations when they feel like they need to do it because their tenants are going to demand it, just like they're going to demand parking. So I just want to make sure that we're not imposing a cost unnecessarily.
But at the same time, we've seen over the years, I mean, the city we put in the first charging station as part of the Terrace Avenue project. I mean, at some point you have to seed, help provide that incentive, but now EV is, much more popular.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
So Alderman Nairo, were you proposing that we would strike the language around the EV ready and only require a percentage to be provided with level 2 chargers?
No, I was suggesting that, for example, the first line of 10%. I think if we're going to ask for 10%, up to 10% of the parking to at least be vehicle EV ready, it just, today, it makes sense to require at least one actual charger and not just have them be wired to be ready to put the chargers in. So that's why I could live with not saying 5% have to be installed, 10% is your, another 5% is your vehicle ready. But I just can't imagine any parking structure that does not have a charger today. I just can't.
But actually, yeah, I would put the minimum at 2 because the way they're set up, they're 2-sided and just for vehicles and access. Financially, it would make sense to just to have 2.
I think too, when we worked with MG&E to get them installed in Terrace Avenue, that if you supply them to a non-demarcated stall, you also need to supply them to an accessible stall. So that would be another reason why.
Okay. So minimum of 2.
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds good.
And then keep the percentages for total at least EV ready. Okay.
So keep the percentages, so that table would be untouched.
Table would be untouched, but there'd still be a minimum of 2.
And these would be revisited. There was a recommendation somewhere, reviewing these numbers on a regular basis. I think it said. Yeah, that was part of their recommendation.
Right. Okay.
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 Okay, moving on to number 8, bird safe glass. This one, it's recommended that we remove it because of the litigation. Any objections?
Does anyone know anything more about the litigation? I'd be just interested to hear what
We
the
know
issue
about
is.
He does.
I think the question is, should it be in the zoning code or the building code? It does seem like a building code kind of thing, but I guess Madison has one. Yeah, we don't have enough.
Asking what the SAS is in litigation. Does anyone know about it? But we don't know the details, but based on several inputs that we got, we recommended not making that requirement now. And that's why we changed, but we didn't want to lose the language in the ordinance either. So I changed everything in that section to say recommend instead of shall, it says should.
Okay. All right.
But we will not be adding it as an incentive per our previous discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so okay with that? All right. Number 9, low impact development. This is coming from Herb Garn's comments. Staff, I guess I would ask, as you worked with the consultant, Mark, to develop this, was low impact development considered?
We have not we did not, that wasn't a pillar upon which this was built. I have not talked with him about Herb Garn's feedback. I just haven't had a chance to do that yet. I wanted to get guidance from you in terms of how to incorporate these standards. So the answer is no.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of green stormwater infrastructure. And so I think it's worth taking a pass through the Herb's recommendations and the current wording of the zoning code draft to see where we can implement these items. I want to say this is even a comp plan action, if I remember correctly. Not low impact development specifically, but green stormwater infrastructure.
It seemed to me water resources in stormwater management primarily, and a comp plan as well, but I was struggling to see where it fits into the zoning code.
It's a very important topic, a very broad topic, and it has ramifications for a lot of different sections of the code. So I just haven't had a chance to talk to Ben about it. We got the input from Herb over the last couple of weeks, and all the other committees. I just was trying to keep up with all the input I was getting. So I haven't delved into a lot of it yet.
Well, I'd be curious to see what changes we can make. So unless there's an objection, we'll ask staff to work on this.
Sounds good.
All right, great. Moving on to number 10, lighting regulations. The prohibition on lighting, which is used to outline a building, structure, or window, including but not limited to rope, neon, and fluorescent tube lighting.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this does not apply to holiday lighting, so people who like to put the lights in their windows can do that, or along their roof line. It's more architectural thing, correct?
Yes.
So are we, as it's written, as architectural lighting, which I'll describe as to accent the architectural features of the building, or to make the building more attractive in the nighttime, is that prohibited? Or is it just those areas where it talks about outlining building structure or windows? I didn't understand that.
Yeah,
I think it's this quote from the current draft.
I'm looking up I didn't have the ordinance up. I'm sorry.
I also feel like we have to be careful with this one, because what would be, correct me if I'm using the wrong term here, Randy, but like down lighting and stuff that can be used as an accent is also safety related to for pedestrian walkways. So that I feel like we need to have some flex on.
Well, and I mean, the reason this prohibition is in there, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, is because of dark skies.
Right. Unnecessary lighting. So it's under section 33.10 prohibited lighting. There's 8 or 9 items listed here: searchlights, neon lights, strobe lights, etc., flashing, blinking, etc. And then lighting, yeah, that's the quote right from that line E.
And Public Works talked about this to consider the architectural
Yeah, I couldn't
benefit.
remember which committee that was from. I should.
It was Public Works, because I brought it up. After discussing it in another committee, I brought it up because I'd been to Chicago and was reminded of I forget the name of the building, the Diamond on Michigan Avenue, and asked, would that be prohibited? It's such an integral part of Chicago's skyline.
Yeah, and we do obviously have examples of buildings very close to here that are outlined, and that's raising a concern about whether we should have that prohibited, or whether there's a certain level of lighting that's acceptable. So I just am flagging it because the committee member, there was discussion at a committee about it. Now we know who.
I see no reason to change this.
Same, I'm fine with that prohibition of outlining a building. Seems unnecessary.
Guess a question I have, structure. Is somebody's deck in their backyard considered a structure under this? And if so, would they be not allowed to put rope lights on their structure, on their deck, to create an ambient light in the space on their deck? Or any other kind of lighting, because it's not an exclusive list.
I thought this was just like commercial spaces or like multifamily buildings, but does this apply everywhere then?
Yeah, it does. It doesn't, the prohibition does not specifically say to certain land uses, but there are exceptions for holiday lighting, as the chairperson noted. And it's under 33.03. Let me read that definition. 33.03.
So would a deck be considered a structure, I guess is what you're asking?
any low wattage seasonal decorative lighting is holiday. That's how holiday lighting is defined.
So like party lights at an outdoor restaurant patio space. They're up on the pole, would that be considered a structure, right? Because that, I mean, I think everyone really enjoys that kind of ambiance. Even
Well,
from a distance.
maybe we just need to identify the lighting in item E as non-functional, or, you know, it's not like, because your deck, if you have lights on your deck, it is providing some light. It's not just to decorate.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And same thing in a restaurant situation.
Right.
But reading first time I read this, I'm like, so, my former neighbor had rope light intertwined in his 3-foot fence that he put up in his backyard. Would that be prohibited under this ordinance, the way it's written? And the way I read it is, yes, it would.
It would.
And but that rope light was not intrusive to my yard. It wasn't intrusive to anybody's yard. It's just my next door neighbor now has not quite rope lighting, but lighting on their outdoor patio. Again, it's not intrusive. And so like as a neighbor, I don't care that they have that on there, but it's not on all the time, but there are times I know it's on overnight. And would that be, something that would no longer be allowed? And I'm thinking that, I appreciate the dark sky initiative and the rationale behind it, but also these lights aren't interfering with the inside of my house. Are they going to, and I don't think that's like very pervasive around the city either. So how far is this light traveling to cause, I'm not talking about like stuff we buy for our backyards.
Mhm.
I understand that there's levels of lights that do become invasive to people. But these are things that are far dimmer than your outdoor lights that you turn on at night for safety reasons too. That, depending on where you are and how your house is oriented, can be intrusive into your house.
When we measure in the lighting ordinance that's proposed, the intensity of illumination is 0.5 foot candles above ambient lighting conditions on a cloudless night. That's an example of a standard that's used. We also require full cutoff fixtures. Obviously, rope lighting is not involved that type of fixture. My concern with this language is also using the fence example is when is something a holiday light and when isn't it? I don't want to be in the position of having to tell someone, well, what holiday are you celebrating? I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. So, that's not going to happen. We do complaint-based enforcement for starters. So I would hope that, somebody's not going to be that upset at their neighbor that they would report something like that. But yeah, I mean, there are on-building lighting is defined on page 5 of the code. We don't have it up in front of us, but there are standards in here that I, given the hour, don't want to go through right now, but it looks like she's already there. I'm not surprised. So keep bottom of page 5. A little more. On building lighting is an example of it. So yeah, I mean, there's, here it talks about functional lighting. We talked about that already too. So I think I just am flagging it for you because that was something that was discussed by a committee, and I don't know.
Well,
I don't have a suggestion.
If I think about this, the question was, is it too onerous? And so this has already been in our code for a long time, right?
No, this is being proposed.
Oh, this is
in the
being
new
added?
code. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was my question. It wasn't a committee that asked that. I just was, I'm just trying to generate discussion.
Sure.
Item E that's showing here includes decorative building or landscape lighting and says it shall not exceed 100 watts. So wouldn't the lighting on your deck or your neighbor's fence be considered either decorative or landscape
So I
lighting?
assume so, yeah.
And it's not going to exceed 100 watts, not even close. It's going to be. So
I guess it's just to me that I guess I'd have to look at the whole, everything altogether, but that seems then to kind of go counter to the section said this will be, these are not prohibited in the city of Middleton, or these will not be allowed or permitted in the city of Middleton. So it's like, so is it allowed or is it not allowed? And that's where I'm guessing now confused.
I do think there are some contradictions between what this says here and item E and perhaps others in here. So can
I'll
we?
follow up with the consultant on that too.
Yep. And I do know this particular provision is really important to the dark sky model ordinance. So I anticipate getting feedback from constituents who are really concerned, especially in areas that are near the conservancy. This is a big concern. But so we'll ask staff to come back to us with some suggestions for how to tighten that up. Abby, you heard what I said, yes?
Yes.
Okay,
I got
thank
it.
you. All right, moving on to fencing standards. Our penultimate item, draft code requires fences to be architecturally compatible with the design and materials of the principal building. I'm the one who brought this up as maybe being a little onerous because my question was, if you can put up a chain link fence, which you can, how is that architecture? What is that architecturally compatible with? You know, and what does it mean to be compatible with the design and materials of the principal building? What if you have brick? What if, and there's just so many ways to interpret that. So I don't know if Daphne can bring this part 10:06:40.
Do we allow chain link fences? I remember one discussion where we approved one, but it was really tough.
It's not in the front. I think it's only on the sides and the back. I think Daphne's bringing it up. So there's this whole list of materials you can have, including galvanized and or coated chain link.
And this is residential and commercial that this applies to?
Daphne, can you scroll back up so we can see if this applies to residential and commercial?
So I think this applies to all standards, but then if you scroll down further, it talks about specific types that are not permitted in front yards in certain districts.
Yeah. And then if you scroll down a little bit more. So this is where it says in item 3. Well, it says they shall not be architecturally incompatible, which I guess is different than saying it shall be compatible.
Yeah.
But
That wording is better.
Agreed.
Yeah. I like that wording.
Oh, good, you solved everything.
How would that be interpreted?
I think that it would probably be an interpretation of the zoning administrator to determine that. I know that we had a case probably going back 10 years now where somebody wanted to do the cable wiring fence with the wooden posts, which is one of the permitted types of materials in this new code. And we had to make a determination about whether or not that was considered decorative. And I remember Mark and I kind of puzzled over it because we didn't really have any examples at the time. We determined that it was decorative. It went in, it's on Elmwood Avenue. It looks very nice. I would not say that it's necessarily architecturally compatible with the house, like in terms of the style of the home and the style of the fence. But it looks really nice and we haven't had any concerns about the fence since it was installed. Yes,
Yeah, that
with
was great.
the cable. Mhm. So Mark, would you agree that you would be tasked with when we get a permit for a fence application and if there's a question about whether or not the material is architecturally incompatible, you would have to make the determination, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking for some more definition, as a homeowner who is actually considering putting up a fence, I would not know what, I would have to come to the zoning administrator and say, can you help me identify something that would pass this test? Because I don't think it's very clear what that means. So I don't know if there's a way to provide an example.
But wouldn't you would go to a fencing company and they would measure your yard and look at your house and provide you with some options, and they would probably make ones compatible with your house. And then you would take that to the city and say, would this work? Right? The one that fits your budget. That's how most design processes go.
Right. But again, there's like no certainty then for the.
But all the other requirements are up above.
Right.
What you can use. So I mean, I think it's pretty well outlined. I guess I'm looking at, I don't think I have anything that needs to.
Are you considering striking the language not architecturally incompatible? Is that, I stepped out for a moment. Is that what you were discussing?
No, I think we were, at least, I'm comfortable with the way that it's presented on the screen now.
Yeah, we like this language better.
Okay. Because, do I want to be faced with having to look at every fence and deciding and comparing that to someone's, the rest of the materials on their property? I'd rather just say, if it's a picket fence. Anyway,
yeah. Well, that's
last
like
thing I want
the
to do is
list,
be on the defense.
the list. Oh my gosh. The list of materials, that's very objective. You can look at that and say, I'm going to pick this one, but not architecturally incompatible is, I think, extremely subjective.
Right.
Which is why the zoning administrator would have to be the one to make the call. Right.
The only time that's where that would come into play is if somebody's deviating from this list of standards, as far as I'm concerned. We're pretty accommodating, I guess, of people's plans, unless there's something that's so, like Abby noted earlier, that the example that was used, that we think that turned out great. The current code didn't address it specifically, but that example in Elmwood, is a really, it's unique, it's distinctive, it's perfectly fine. So we're not going to use this code as a way to try and find problems, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, I can try to live with the subjectivity.
We have a different standard for Whittlesey Road.
You have to bring in your architect to make that call.
Okay. And then finally, landscaping standards. Water Resources recommends that trees be favored to meet landscaping requirements. And so the question is, should the proposed point system be modified? I can live with that.
Same.
Sounds good. Motion to adjourn.
All right, well, wait, can't do that quite yet. We need a motion to direct staff to make the changes discussed in items 1 through 12 tonight.
Well, some of the items there were coming back to us on, right?
Right, based on the discussion that we had.
Do you have enough feedback?
It's up to you if you want to make a motion. I don't really know how the motion would read. So that's up to you to come up with that, I guess. But we have enough. We've taken notes here. We have the recording. I think the consensus of the commission is that if you don't mind, Alder Haniro, is that we could just have the consensus reflect that. I come back with the report at the next meeting on outstanding issues. If you'd like it to be a motion, that's fine. I just need to know what you want, how you want it phrased.
Let me see what all is in here.
I think since we need some clarification, I don't think we need a motion.
Because otherwise, there were some differences of opinion on a few things. I guess you kind of went through everything and came up with a consensus of where you needed more work. So it's up to you how you want to handle it. We don't need it. We're not asking for it.
You're not asking for a motion?
It's not necessary.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got enough through our discussion. You've heard the consensus of the commission and you'll come back to us with with updates where we agreed with the changes and with more information on the areas where we needed more. Okay, do we need to set the hearing tonight? Or can that wait too? I think my gut tells me the hearing is not going to be on Tuesday, October 24th.
We are working towards that goal. If that's something that can be accommodated, we have a number of areas to research. I defer to your judgment. We obviously have been working at this for a couple of years. We've got the bones of the ordinance, of the draft ordinance are there. We're starting a public process with open houses this week. We have council has budget season, which we're going to end up being in the middle of anyway, whether the hearing's held on October 24th or November, whatever the next day is, next plan commission meeting. Either way, it's kind of in budget season. So I don't know. It's up to you.
As someone who used to do stakeholder engagement in my career, I think it's important to make sure we've built in enough time from the conclusion of the workshops or the open houses rather, until we have a chance to digest everything that came in. I worry if we set the date now for the 24th, it will look like we're just checking a box with those open houses.
Agreed.
Agreed. All right, so given that, Commissioner Harp.
Well, do we want to move it to November then?
I would say let's consider it at our next meeting.
Okay, got you.
Well, so
So then I'll
anything we
motion to
have,
adjourn.
yeah. Anything we did not cover tonight, we'll cover at our next meeting.
Second.
And now we have a motion and a second to adjourn. There's no debate. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.
Good night.
Everyone.
Thank you all.